That summer, the harbour town smelled of brine and warm bread, and I learned to listen. The days stretched like sails in the afternoon glare, and the heat drew itself out of the stones so slowly you could almost feel it turning into tomorrow. I was 10 perhaps, and my grandmother's kitchen was a magnet. The kettle sang to the stove, onions peeled like old secrets, and the air tasted faintly of lemon soap and tar from the docks. Our porch faced the water, and beyond it the fishermen's nets lay in ragged rows, pale moons of cotton drying in the sun. On the far edge of the village lived a boy named Mateo, a shy thing with eyes that kept their own counsel and never hurried to meet yours. He visited only when his mother wasn't at the market or his father was fixing something with a stubborn bolt and a stubborn heart. He wore his nerves like a thin jacket and kept them zipped, even when the day grew heavy with heat, and the sound of cicadas stitched the town together in a single, slow heartbeat. One morning a plan formed, like a gull's wing beating over the water. Mateo and I would repair the old skiff that lay in the shade of the boathouse, a boat no one used since the last storm dragged the pier a few inches toward the river, and the planks bubbled with time and salt. We sanded and brushed away the salt that clung to the wood like a memory you didn't want to forget. We hammered with careful blows that didn't ring out so much as they listened, learning as much from what we failed to do as from what we did right. The skiff deserved the harbour's patience. It waited, stubborn and stubbornly hopeful, for us to coax its story back into the water. But the river is a stern teacher, and it does not suffer fools gladly. A misaligned plank gave way with a sigh of old timber, and the boat dropped into the shallows with a splintered sigh. Water lapped at the crack where the boards were weak, and the varnish peeled like a sigh you could hear if you listened long enough. Mateo's fingers trembled a little as he reached for the hammer again, and I felt the weight of a decision in the moment before the next strike. The old man who kept the boathouse, a man with weathered hands and a voice that spoke in tides, came over. He watched us without hurry, then bent to show us how to begin again, to lay the keel with 2 careful half-hitches, and a knot that would hold even when the river decided to flex its muscles. He spoke softly of patience, of how a small boat asks for a careful hand and a steady eye, and how pride can turn to dust if you trust it too much. We finished as the sun lowered, the light thin and gold as a coin you saved for a wish. The skiff slept on the water now, a little keel slicing the quiet of the harbour, and the river, which had watched more summers than I could count, found its own way to forgive our clumsy first attempt. Mateo's breath came slow, and when he looked at me, it wasn't with the tremor of fear, but with the tentative spark of belonging. We could do this. We could learn. That evening, Grandma poured cool water for us from the pitcher and spoke of the river as if it were a person who listened to the days you told it. "Every boat has a story," she said, setting the cups in front of us, the clink of glass a gentle punctuation in the room. We told the day's small triumphs and failures, and for a moment the world grew soft around us, as if the harbour itself was listening, not wanting to rush us out of childhood's quiet drama. In the nights that followed, I learned the most important detail of the skiff's tale. It wasn't the repaired wood or the tightened knots that mattered most. It was the way Mateo looked at me when I spoke softly about the river's patience, the way his shoulders sank a little from tension and lifted with new trust. It was in the way the misfit boat reminded us that we were not finished yet, that even our mistakes could be part of a larger craft if we kept a careful hand on the wheel. That moment, sitting on the pier after supper, the sky turning the colour of a shell, and the river holding its breath, taught me a stubborn truth I carried into every room I ever entered. To be useful is to be gentle, and to be gentle is to be brave in the smallest, most ordinary of ways. The harbour did not reward loudness. It rewarded the patient, the ones who listened to wood and water and wordless warnings, who learned to wait when the tide turned, and to repair what was worn with a quiet, stubborn kindness. Years later, the memory remained, not as a single polished event, but as a long, quiet current running beneath me. I carried it into classrooms and kitchens, into crowded rooms where voices rose and fell, into the evenings when I sat with neighbours and listened to their sorrows and small victories as if they were tides turning. I learned to attend to details, the turn of a door hinge, the tremor of a child's hand when fear found its way into a room, the way someone's mood could soften with a cup of tea and a patient listener. It was not grand, no thunderbolt of revelation, but a dozen tiny, faithful acts that accumulated into a life of steadiness. In retirement, I did not vanish into the soft hum of memory. I kept a pen that was almost always near, and I kept a bench by the old oak in the yard where the world still comes to watch the seasons turn. I tell my grandchildren about the Skiff, how its first voyage was a timid negotiation between fear and trust, how Mateo and I found a language in our hands, the hammer's rhythm, the knot's patience, the way the river seemed to approve of our quiet persistence. I tell them that the harbour forgives many things, but not a rash heart. I tell them the joy of small, honest work, and how a single act of care can ripple outward, like water crossing the lips of a stone. What I did not know then, in the bright heat and the smell of tar and bread, was how deeply those hours would shape the person I became. I thought we were merely fixing an old boat and spending a lazy summer in a town that smelled of salt and sun. I did not foresee that the lesson would become the backbone of my life, to mend not only wood, but also broken things I found along the way, the brittle ego, the stubborn fear, the loneliness of a friend who did not know how to ask for help. I learned to listen first, to offer second, and to wait with a steady heartbeat for the chance to be useful again. And now, as the years gather around me like a soft shawl, I feel the way time folds over itself, how the summer that seemed to stretch forever was, in truth, a small doorway that opened into adulthood's patient rooms. The Skiff is gone, or perhaps simply dismissed into a memory that glitters when the light catches it just right. The river still runs by the village, and the air still carries the scent of bread and rain and the quiet weight of the boats at rest. The harbour is older now, and so are the stories we tell about it, but the core remains: to listen, to learn, to hold fast to the things that cannot be rushed, things like a promise kept between friends, a cure for fear found in a careful knot, a life shaped by hands that mend what others may throw away. If you ask me what that summer gave me, I will tell you the same thing I tell my grandchildren on nights when the ceiling feels too close and the house too full of shadows. It gave me a way to stand beside others without crowding them away, a way to smooth the rough edges of a day with a quiet word and a steady hand. It gave me the memory of a boat's soft demand to be tended, and the sense that care done with patience, not hurry, can change the course of a life as surely as a river can carve its own path through stone. Time moves on, as it always does, with or without our consent, yet meaning endures, tucked into the corners of ordinary days, the way a porch light flickers at dusk, the way a kettle sighs on the stove, the way a child's small hand finds yours in the dark and knows you are there. I am old enough now to know that the heart's work is never finished, only carried forward. Like a boat, I once learned to steady and steer through a season's weather. And so I keep the memory close, as a harbour always keeps its bell and its call to home. For in the end, gratitude is the only compass that never falters. I am grateful for that long ago afternoon when a shy boy and a stubborn boat taught me to listen. I am grateful for the river's patient rhythm, for a grandmother who trusted small things to be enough, and for the simple, sturdy truth that the work of care is the work of love, steadfast and true.